Any ads heard during this episode that are not in our voice are placed by third-party agencies. They should not be considered the opinion of or to be endorsed by Hoosier Myths and Legends.
Welcome to another episode of the Hoosier Myths and Legends podcast.
I'm Rebecca Wilhelm.
I'm Mary Quigley.
And I'm Hope Wilhelm.
Join us as we dive into the spookier side of the Hoosier state.
So what comes to your mind when you think of Indiana? Do you think of corn? Do you think of basketball? Do you think of the Indianapolis 500? Maybe you think of famous celebrities who were born in Indiana, like John Mellencamp or Michael Jackson.
But as the saying goes, there is more than corn in Indiana. 92 counties make up the Hoosier state. In this podcast, we are going to discuss some Indiana folklore from each of these counties. If you are into tall tales, ghosts, or spooky legends, then this is a podcast you are not going to want to miss. Today's episode is a little different than what we normally do. We are proud to welcome to the podcast for the first time ever authors Christopher and Christina Hunt. They are the authors of the book Ghosts and Legends of Crawfordsville, Indiana. Their book is part of the Haunted America series.
Now, listeners, the synopsis on the back of their book is intriguing, and I think it makes the perfect introduction for today's episode. So I'm going to read the back of their book. Crawfordsville, Indiana has a rich history of spiritualism and paranormal lore. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, mediums were trained in the city and spiritualism was preached from the street corners. Spirit photography was all the rage, and many flocked to town to have their photos taken with ghosts. The Crawfordsville monster caused a nationwide stir after terrorizing the town for several days and being spotted by more than 100 people. Urban legends also abound in this small city. Legends like the cursed chair of Oak Hill Cemetery, Spooky Hollow, and the old hospital. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back and relax as we sit down and chat with authors Christopher and Christina Hunt as they share their book with us and we delve into some of the mysteries that Crawfordsville and Montgomery County have to offer.
We're talking with Christopher and Christina Hunt, the authors of Ghosts and Legends of Crawfordsville, Indiana. The book was released on September 18th, 2023, and welcome to the show. Can you tell us a little bit about yourselves?
I was a computer tech for a really long time, and then I retired from that and am working, kind of doing other things now.
I've worked at our local public library for 24 years. And I'm just now deciding that libraries are not everything that I want to be. I do want to stay in libraries, but I'm also really passionate about social work. So I'm going back to school to get my social working license so that I can provide social services within the library.
That's awesome. I love that.
I'm interested in, how did you guys get interested in the paranormal?
So for me, that has always been something that's been really big in our family, sharing ghost stories and things like that. We would have big family get-togethers and everybody would sit around a campfire or something and we'd sit down and talk. So sharing these type of stories was always something that was really passionate in my family. And so that kind of carried over into our marriage. And we started researching that pretty much very quickly once we got married and realized we had a common interest in.
I've always been obsessed with those creatures you can't explain. I was raised in an extremely religious family with a very, very strict church, but I was always obsessed with the giants from the Bible. And so I spent a lot of time researching that, and then I found Bigfoot, and I just fell in love, and I went down a rabbit hole, and I never stopped. So I'm more of the cryptid guy, And she's more of the ghost,
Yeah.
paranormal kind of stuff. So it works.
It's a good balance of the two.
I think so too. Yeah.
And we really enjoy it. We did find that we really enjoy the research aspect of it. And I literally, every day, I set an hour aside to do nothing but research this field in our state.
I'm really passionate about our local history and our county history. And so being able to meld these two passions together has just been a wonderful thing.
That's what we love too. I think it's so fun that you guys say the same thing because there's so much history that I don't think people realize is here in our state. And if you can connect it to like a fun ghost story, then we're interested in it.
Well, it's insane. The Crawfordsville's got so much history. Over 200 years, all the way back to before the founding of the county, we have stories and legends before our county was even founded. So it's a very interesting field of study here.
And it's kind of been like a little hidden history for our county because so many people had no idea that this was such a rich thing in our past because it kind of went away for about 100 years.
I'll be honest, I didn't realize there was that much in Crawfordsville either until I read your book. There's a lot.
And it really, our book doesn't fully do it justice. We were very limited. They made me cut a lot from what we wrote. So there wasn't a whole lot of wiggle room. I was right there on the words that they allowed us to use. I couldn't go one more word over. So it was very painstaking to figure out what to put in, what not, because Crawfordsville had at least 100 years of open spiritualism where they trained mediums and spiritualists in the city of Crawfordsville.
That's neat.
That's neat.
With the history.
It's also fantastic. Like it has so many, like Linden and Ladoga and Wayland have all of these stories as well that we also want to collect and share. So that's kind of where we're hoping to go.
And when we started this 13 years ago now, we always say 10, but it's been 13 years. I would go to the library to spend time with her on her breaks because she was working there and we were dating. And so I would go upstairs and do the research just for fun to kill time while I was waiting on her to get off work. And I found some really interesting things that we actually built an archive at our library for the paranormal. So that our library now, if anyone goes to it wanting to do this research, I have built an archive there and our archivist can pull it out and show everybody.
I love that. It makes me want to make
that road trip.
Road trip.
Our archivist is the most wonderful person on the planet, and we couldn't have done any of this without her.
That's amazing. Well, that kind of leads into the next question, which is, can you tell us a little bit about the Crawfordsville Paranormal Society? Because again, I hadn't heard of it till we spoke to you guys and how you're involved with that.
So about 11 or 12 years ago, we founded the Crawfordsville Paranormal Society. Sitting on our couch, thought we should do this. We really like watching the TV shows. And I'm obsessed with research. And so we thought, okay, we're going to do this. So we invited some local people to join us. We got some really good members who joined us over the years. But then we found that even though the investigations are fun and it's kind of neat to go and do the stuff, and we do have all the equipment and we do still once in a while do these things, we actually have one coming up. We found that the research side of things is more of our passion. We're more passionate about doing research than we are about doing investigations. And so we kind of stepped back from that and changed it from Crawfordsville Paranormal Society to Legends, Lore, and Haunting.
Okay. That's something that Mary and I share in common with you guys too. We love the research aspect of everything.
Everyone always asks, are you going to go on a ghost hunt? And I'm like, no.
Well, as far as our investigations went, we had several people who would reach out to us with like concerns for their families and things like that. And we were absolutely, yes, we want to ease your concerns. And so we're very thorough when we go into investigations. And so we would end up debunking a lot of stuff. Like we had one instance where a baby had been exposed to black mold and that was causing sickness. And they had thought that the baby was being attacked by a spirit, but it was black mold. She was very grateful that we found that. But we had other instances where we would go in and, we would say, this is what's wrong. Like you have a serious problem in your house that you need to fix, like electricity. The electricity in your house is not great. And then people were not really happy with that. So they wanted us to come in and say, you're absolutely haunted. But when we would go in and say, this is what you're experiencing, it's not a haunting. We wish it was, but it's not. They would kind of get upset. So that kind of soured us a little bit on doing some of the local stuff.
Not saying that we didn't catch anything. We do have an EVP that I cannot explain, and I'm a complete skeptic when it comes to this stuff. I do everything under the sun to prove what's really happening, and I cannot disprove this EVP. I've tried everything. It's not possible to disprove it. I mean, it's very interesting to us because of it. But, it became that kind of thing too. Because a lot of people in this area live in really old homes. And so they'll hear noises and stuff. And it's like, that's your radiator turning on. They probably didn't even know existed because we still have people literally who are on the old oil systems.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And they don't understand there's a huge difference there. So, we really enjoyed that stuff. We were like helping people. And it was pretty cool to find something we couldn't explain.
Yeah. It's very creepy. It still kind of gives me the shivers when I think about it. So
it's neat when you find those things too, that you just cannot explain it. Something happens and you're like, I know this ain't possible, but look at this. So can you tell us how the idea of writing the book came about?
They contacted us and said, hey, would you like to write this book? And I said, yeah, you're fake. Click. And
we did the same thing.
So Mary and we did the same thing. They had listened to the podcast. They sent us an email and we're like, no way.
And so we have a friend who's also a giant historian here. And without her, this would have never been possible. But she's written for that company a half a dozen times. Mm-hmm. So we contacted her immediately and we're like, is this true? Is this how they do things? And she was like, yeah, they just send you an email and ask if you want to write on that subject. And we're like, okay, we can do that. And so we went down the rabbit hole with them and it became something we weren't expecting.
Yes.
We originally talked to them. They told us that we had a year to write it. And we're like, we can do this in a year. We've been researching for a really long time. And then it went about 2 weeks and they contacted us and they're like, how about 4 months? And we said, we'll try. And we got it done in 4 months, but that is because we had put years of research into it.
Yeah. And that was nerve-wracking. That was very difficult to do because when he came back and said, hey, we're going to give you 4 months. I'm like, how do I do this in 4 months? Especially with pictures. Because almost every picture in there I personally took of the locations, and that wasn't easy to do that time of year. So it was an interesting rabbit hole.
Well, we absolutely love your book, and we have to ask, even though the title is pretty self-explanatory, how would you guys describe it to people?
Well, one of the things that we particularly like to say is that it's kind of like how Aesop's fables are told in order to teach lessons, that we believe the stories and legends that we pass down about these things are important parts of history. And so I like to describe the book as lessons from our history, lessons from our county's history that we need to know and understand in order to understand our county.
And when you read our book, it's very easy to notice that almost everything in it, I would say 95% is documented. I either have a newspaper article showing that happened, another book that is written in, or something along those lines, or it's an urban legend that's been told here for so long that it's every kid in the area knows it as soon as you bring it up, kind of thing. So we were really diligent about that, making it as true to history as we could. Even if the ghost isn't real, the story was real. And that was very, very important to us to make sure we had all that information.
Yeah. And it means something to the families and the people that live here.
I think that's really important. It's a real good way to connect it, that it's part of history. So what ghost story in this book do you think will most grab someone's attention when they read it?
So we have argued back and forth about this a couple of times over which one we think is the most exciting. And I think that we finally settled on A.D. Willis's Spirit Photography Studio.
Okay.
And I think one of the things about that is the most exciting about it is that we do have 3 of his actual pictures in the book.
I have found a 4th, finally, in the country. I found a 4th. I'm trying to get rights to it. And we're actually trying to get ownership 2 of the 3 photos, but because we now know the people personally who have them, which is really cool. And I feel like that one's so big because it couldn't be disproven. They tried everything and tried to spend thousands of dollars at a time where $1,000 is $1 million to try to disprove this gentleman. He couldn't do it. And so that was very interesting. His whole family is interesting. I could have wrote a book on his family because his whole family is very interesting. His brother created a cure-all that was bought by Eli Lilly for lots and lots of money that mysteriously disappeared after that. His son had some crazy things happen to him.
His son has a really fascinating tombstone in our local cemetery that tells the entire story of his life and how he died. And it's very sad, but I mean, it's the whole family is just
very interesting.
Yeah. We went on a huge genealogy rabbit hole with his whole family.
Yes. I will say the other story that I think is big isn't a ghost story for us. And I think that's one of the things that grabs us is it's a cryptid story. And that, of course, is the Crawfordsville monster.
Yes.
It's my favorite thing. I've been studying it since I was a kid. We actually might have access to the family who did the interviews finally through some rabbit holing. I am actually going to be sending them a letter this week if they will sit down and talk to us about Vincent Gaddis's writings after he interviewed the people who were alive at the time on it. And so that's a huge one for us and extremely important to us. We do consider it more of a cryptid than a ghost.
And I think even though you said the one that's the most captivating to us, our third choice in picking this is the Crawfordsville Ghost Club. And if you ever come to Crawfordsville and you do one of our ghost tours downtown, you will hear me say, we have absolutely no proof that this club has ever been dissolved. And so if there are any secret members of this Crawfordsville Ghost Society that still exist, we're looking to join. Hit us up.
I thought that was so cool when I read it, though. I'm like, that's a thing? That's so fun.
It was neat to see that was written about in the New York Times.
Yes.
I was like, oh my Lord, the New York Times is writing about Crawfordsville and it's not telling us we're crazy.
Yes. Well, I think one of the fun things about writing a book like this is interviewing people. So I have to know who's the most interesting person you interviewed.
Okay, so that is definitely going to be Deli Craig, who is the local historian at the Crawfordsville District Public Library. She can find you anything. If you are looking for something, she knows where it is. She knows how to find it. And just sitting down with her and learning her knowledge on how to do this research has to be by far the greatest interview that we did, because she really held our hand and baby stepped us through doing all of this. And she is also the type of lady that even now, even though this book has been written and we're moving on to other things, she's still finding stuff and setting it aside for us. So that's my pick.
And I'd say my pick is Karen Zock. Karen is a historian for this section of the state. She does 3 different counties, Park County, Putnam County, actually 4, Fountain County, and Montgomery County. She's a historian for all of them. She actually even has her own website that we do reference in our book. But she was huge. She would send us things and articles and just chat with us and help us so much. And of course, she had written books before for the same company. So she was a lot of great information on how to do this. So it was very, very important that we, gave her all the kudos we can. But without her and Deli, I don't know where it would be. We'd still be trying to figure it out.
And Karen is actually responsible for finding just a little smidgen of an article referencing one of my favorite stories from the book, which is about Madame Crow. She had found just a little teeny article that had mentioned the fortune teller Madame Crow. And she's like, I don't know what you want to do with this. If you want to, look more into this. And then that sent me spiraling, learning all I could about Madame Crow. She's one of my favorite people that we have discovered from the Montgomery County history. And I would never have found that if Karen hadn't just stumbled across it during her research.
And it was interesting, too, because like with Deli, in the giant graveyard, all we had was a very small article telling us kind of the location. She found it. Like, I've actually been to the location, and I took pictures of it for the book. That was huge to actually be able to take something that was on paper and actually put your eyes on it. I mean, that's just such a big thing. I'm hoping to get permission from the landowners to go out and do some checking out of the property.
Oh, that's fun. You'll have to let us know if they actually let you do it.
Yes. We are going to take a short break. We'll be back with more from Christopher and Christina Hunt when we return. We are back, and we're talking with Christopher and Christina Hunt, the authors of Ghosts and Legends of Crawfordsville, Indiana. What was the most unexpected challenge that you encountered while writing the book?
I think it's divided up amongst the time, going from a year to 4 months, and trying to come up with pictures and getting them to them correctly, because it's hard to find a 200-year-old picture that they accept that they can use in the book. That was a very difficult thing. It became a real time. I would probably say the last 30 days, that's all I did was deal with pictures, trying to figure out how do I get a picture from the old hospital that's from 150 years ago that they can accept to be able to put in the book. That was very, very difficult.
One of the things that I found the most challenging when writing this book is I didn't know whether I was coming home to my husband or to a 1900s newsboy, because he would absorb the language that he was reading in the newspapers, and then that's how he would talk for 3 days. And I was like, who are you? Are you Christopher today, or are you out, selling newspapers for nickel?
Love it.
And thankfully, she's a great editor, because that's exactly how I write too. Whatever I'm reading is how I write. And so she has to go back and make it legible.
There are a couple instances in the book where I left it in verbatim how he read it. And if you go through and you just in your head hear, a very interesting story happened today. And that is definitely he has absorbed the newspapers and the speech and verbiage that they've been using.
Easy to do when you're reading these gossip rags.
Yes.
Yeah, that's very true. So while you guys were doing all this research, did you uncover anything that was surprising to you? Something you didn't know? Did you learn something you didn't know? Something surprising or fascinating?
I think Fisher Doherty, he was huge to our town. And even today, he's huge to our town because of the Underground Railroad. Crawfordsville is famous for the Underground Railroad. We have places here now, museums and things like that, devoted completely to that. From John Speed and him. Finding out that he was actually a spiritualist and a medium, and he even created a place that we just recently discovered a location for, Spiritual Hall. That was fascinating to find out that this guy had a whole nother side of him. And they tried to get him to run for governor at one point, because he was so popular in the state. So that was a very interesting thing to me, was finding out more about him.
Yeah. Well, and as popular as he was, he also had his naysayers. There was a spiritual person in town who thought he was the devil, and then he's even quoted as calling him the devil. But everybody else kind of really loved him. The most surprising thing that I found in my research is I found out that my great-great-grandmother was a spiritual healer here in town, and I had no idea. And so they talk about her in the newspapers, and that you can go down and get healing from her and where she was located. And that was something nobody in my family had ever talked about.
And we didn't know about this till about 4 months after we put out the book.
Yeah. And my mom was like, hey, your great-great-grandmother did that. And I said, no, I didn't know that. And then so I went and researched, and yeah, she did. Her name was Madam Schaefer.
That is really neat.
That is really neat. I love that. Who would have known? Such a small world. Okay, so what is your favorite story from the book?
Mine is definitely Madam Crow. I just found her story really fascinating. She seemed like a wonderful character. People described her as being able to spit fire, and that she drank blood, and that she had skeletons in her house that she talked to. She opened a shop at one point and opened it in the back of a mortuary, and had a coffin as her desk when people came in.
I love that.
This was in, the late 1800s, and she was just very eccentric, and people loved her. Just like Fisher Doherty, there are also people that hated her, but she was so popular that a congressman came to get her opinion over whether or not he was going to win the election. She did tell him no. He did lose, but then he was so impressed that she had correctly guessed he was going to lose. He went back to Congress and told Congress about this fortune teller here in Crawfordsville that told him he wasn't going to win, and she was right. And I thought, that is such a weird thing to brag about.
It is.
For me, it's the Crawfordsville Monster. It's been my passion my whole life, pretty much. And finding in reading a lot of things that were talked about after the gentleman tried to claim it was birds, also is fascinating, because according to the people of Crawfordsville, never believed it was birds. It was only the two gentlemen who came up with this idea that it was a flock of killdeer. And so reading about that and in going down the rabbit hole of that, and in knowing that the interview still exists to this day in New York, and having the passion that I want to go get them and see them and actually see what people talked about 100 years ago.
Right. Right. So the next question that I was going to ask is you kind of just answered that. I wanted to know your favorite cryptid legend in the book. So Christopher, we know yours is Crawfordsville Monster. Christina, what would your favorite cryptid be?
I like the reptile monster, and I cannot remember the guy's name. He's my details guy, but there was some sort of like ancient dinosaur reptile that was discovered. And unfortunately, the townspeople killed it rather than kept it. But then they took it and put it on display. And you would think that there would be pictures of that somewhere. We could not find pictures, but we have references to Wabash College professors having done experiments on it and not being able to place where it was from. And that, that they all said it was some sort of ancient dinosaur that they'd never even heard of. It was some sort of, what's the word I'm thinking of? It was like some sort of line from a dinosaur.
Yeah. That
we couldn't place. And I'm thinking, where is all the rest of this documentation? Like, I need those archives. So
I think the second one for me is the giant graveyard, because of the fact that I work at Wabash, and in talking to some of the professors there, and they're fascinated with the idea that their own people went there to research it, because there's no history of it at the college. The college many, many years ago did away with a lot of their history product that was from early times because of a fire that happened. And so I can't get the actual archives showing that time period, but the archivist over there and some of the others that I've talked to were fascinated with the idea that these guys had actually dug up a place just on the outside of town at that time. Now it's in town, but at that time it was just on the outside of town. That's fascinating to everyone I've talked to about it, that you could find something like that right here. You don't expect to find ancient bones in the middle of Crawfordsville.
No.
The other thing Crawfordsville is very well known for, is our crinoids. And we have species of crinoids that are not found any other place in the United States. And we are a hotbed for that, because we were underwater at one point, and you will find not only like the little stems, but you find the whole heads of the crinoid flower plant here.
That's interesting.
A lot of really cool archaeological things that are going on here.
Another thing that we really liked was the section about Wabash College. So I want to know what your favorite legend from the college would be.
I would have to say, well, that too on that, because there's the favorite story that I've heard. And then there's the story that scares me to death. As a custodian of the college, I deal with the people regularly who see these things and talk about these things at the college. And my favorite story is Lame Nakai. That story is just amazing. And the kids will tell you all about it, and they love it. And the plaque that's in that building is fascinating. But the library scares me. I worked in the library for a year at night, and I had to go down to the worst floor in that building by myself every night. And it is just plain scary to be down there. You don't feel like you're alone when you're in that area. I don't know a building on that campus you totally feel alone in, but that building is terrifying for me. And I know one of my friends, he got terrified from Detchen. He was completely terrified because something there started calling his name. So that really scared him pretty good.
My favorite story from Wabash, I believe we left out of the book.
Well, no, I think they cut it. I'm not sure. It could be in the book. It's hard to remember. We've got so many of these stories, and we are working on the second book. So the science lab was working on dissecting cats, and they were not very humane in how they disposed of the waste when they were done. They were just throwing it out the window into a garbage can.
until the boys started complaining that ghost cats kept showing up and haunting them. And it changed the science department's mind, and they started doing things more humanely and better because the boys were terrified that they were being haunted by ghost cats. And I think that's rightly so. You know, if you're not doing things correctly, you should be haunted by ghost cats.
Very much so.
I totally agree. Ghost cats freak me out. I love cats, but I prefer not to see a ghost cat, so I get it. So what is next for you guys? Do you have any plans to write another book?
I'm currently working on Montgomery County as a whole with all the little townships and a lot of stories we didn't include in the Crawfordsville one, as well as we are working on Park County, including the Indiana State Sanitarium and Billy Creek Village and Rosewood Manor. And those will be out probably pretty close together. We're planning on trying to get those out next year. The Montgomery County book was supposed to be out this year, but the wife is too busy with school to be able to do any kind of tours or promoting or book signings or anything like that. So we had to postpone that one until next year for that. But they won't be with the same company. We are using a different company for our publishing for the next two books.
Nice. That's awesome. I love that you guys are writing more books because we'll definitely read them.
Yes, we can't wait to read them.
Yes. Okay, so where can people buy this book? I mean, I think we pretty much know, but where's the best place for them to buy the book?
Well, I would say the Amazon is probably your best place for everybody. If you're in Crawfordsville, obviously you can pick it up from us really easy. And every museum in Crawfordsville has it, as well as several of the small stores in Crawfordsville have it. So you can pick it up at our town anywhere you go pretty much really easily. But if you're not in Crawfordsville, probably your best location to get it is like Amazon, I would assume. Barnes & Nobles has it too, but Amazon's got prime shipping, so it's just so much more convenient.
And I know that you guys have some events coming up really soon, so we wanted to go ahead and talk about that a little bit so listeners are aware. I know there's an author fair coming up.
Yeah, because we've been doing this for a while now, going to different festivals and conventions and author events to promote the book as well as learn about the process. We learned really quick that in our area of the state, there's not a whole lot for other people. We went to a lot of other parts of the state and, met a lot of people. But in this little area, there's not a ton of things that go on. And we know a lot of independent authors now because we've been going to these events. So we decided that for people who have written a book or either with a company or independently or whatever, it would be really nice to have a little place here where they could come and do sales and stuff to local people without having to drive an hour away. And so we definitely, we wanted to make sure that happened. And we partnered up with Between the Pages in Lebanon. It's a great bookstore. If people have never been there, they should definitely check it out. But we partnered with them, and so we're going to put this on. We hope it does well. We're also going to have a little bit of hand crafts there just to kind of fill up the space because it is a pretty large space. And we do have a lot of people who do handcrafts for things. And then in October, we have our paranormal convention, but she can talk about that.
So it'll be Crawfordsville's first paranormal convention. We're very excited about that. We have several podcasters and groups coming. And
I just talked today. I've got 2 YouTubers coming. And I will be putting out a flyer very soon with everybody who's coming so people can get to know. And we do have other podcasts set up to go on and YouTube shows now to go on to talk to those groups that are coming.
It's just going to be a place for like-minded individuals to get together and share their spooky side and share, their own stories. And we get the privilege of highlighting Crawfordsville in another way to other people who are going to come into this. We're actually talking with some of our local businesses and stuff like that to put out promotions to say, hey, if you want to continue the spookiness outside of the convention, here are the places you can go eat that we know have paranormal hauntings and experiences.
And even though this is the very first paranormal convention, this is not the very first time something like this has happened here. And we actually decided to do it because there used to be a thing in town called the Witches Festival that went on every Halloween. In October, they would have the Witches Festival in Crawfordsville. And so that was a big thing for us. And we're actually trying to get that restarted. And we thought, well, what better way of getting the city to agree to restart Witches Festival if we show them interest in the paranormal here? And so this was the first logical step to that.
So if we can tell everybody that there is an interest, that people do want to experience this and do this, that maybe we can bring that part of history that we've lost back.
Well, I know Mary and I are really looking forward to being a part of the festival in October. So
we're looking forward to seeing you guys.
I'm so excited because there's really not that many paranormal conventions in our state.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the only one I can think of is like the Fort Wayne one, but I don't think there really is anything else.
There's one in Peru.
Is there? Okay.
Yeah, it's called Para-Unity. And then there's one in Evansville, which we went to.
Yeah.
So, but there, like you said,
Evansville Horror Con.
yes, there's not very many in the state. There's just not.
There's
a couple Bigfoot conventions, like there's one in September we're going to. That's really cool. We're going as visitors. We're not doing anything there, but we want to check it out.
We actually got our book club. Our book club is going, so
Yes.
we're excited about that.
But so, there's not, the state just doesn't have a whole lot going on when it comes to that kind of stuff. So anything we can do to promote it and try to get more conventions and things like that going is a huge benefit to everyone who enjoys this type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. We're definitely going to share that with our listeners because we've heard that a lot. And I know that Northwest Indiana had their very first one earlier this year in February. I don't know if they'll, do it again, but I feel like it's starting to grow. We're getting there.
we went and just attended it just to see what it was, and it was neat.
We're planning 2 next year, most likely. We want to create what's called Summer Scare, where at the beginning of summer we'll have one, and then in October we'll have one. So that's our goal anyway, but we'll see what happens at this one. We're going to kind of wait until it actually happens. We've had a really good RSVP. We've had over 1,000 people saying they're coming.
Wow.
We expect it to be pretty large numbers. And Crawfordsville is, at the museums and things like that, when they do the haunting stuff, it's not uncommon to have 2,500 people show up. So we do expect a large crowd for this in the area. So we are very hopeful that this will go well and this becomes an annual, if not semi-annual thing.
So we do want to say, if you come in October and you come to the paranormal convention, you not only have the paranormal convention there, we do our ghost walks as well. So you can attend a ghost walk in the evening, and the Rotary Jail does haunted tours as well.
And we'll also be having a comic and collectible card day for those who like comics and card games and things like that. That'll be going on the same day in another part of Crawfordsville, as well as the Iron Man racing will be going on that
It's
day.
gonna be busy.
Yes, so there'll be a lot of people in town. So
There's enough for everyone.
yes, there's plenty to do, but after the convention, to keep everybody entertained all evening long. Yeah, we do have a ghost hunt coming up in October at the Carnegie Museum on October 5th. That'll be open to the public so that people can come in who've never done this before. We have our equipment there. They'll get to play with the equipment, walk around, and see what they find out.
Well, good.
So the museum will close and they can just have some fun and get to know what the experiences are like.
So where can our listeners find you guys online? Where's the best place to find you online?
We have our website, legendlorehauntings.com, as well as our Facebook page.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Christopher and Christina, for being on our show with us today. We really enjoyed talking to you, and we can't wait to see what you guys have coming next. Have you experienced anything in Crawfordsville or Montgomery County, Indiana? We would love to hear about it. Please send us an email to HoosierMysticLegends@gmail.com or reach out to us on social media. We may use it in a later episode. In the email, let us know if you wish to remain anonymous.
see our source material, please visit our website, HoosierMythsAndLegends.com. Please find us and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and now Twitter. Hoosier Myths and Legends is a Quigley Productions podcast.
Our theme song was written and recorded by Wet Blanket. The song title is Taxidermy Race Car.
As always, stay spooky.